I think under more.
There we go.
Cool.
Cool.
Okay. All right. So to start, can you introduce us and introduce yourself and tell us about your role in this film?
Yes, my name is Angelica Gayle. I'm the writer, director, producer of Animal, and I am a filmmaker. I also work in development full time whilst filmmaking, and I am the founder of None of the Above Media, which is a production entity based in London, as I am from London. And our aim essentially is just to tell underrepresented stories, but with a sort of with a strong cinematic appeal and focusing a lot in genre as well.
Yeah. So would you say that those specific types of stories are the ones that you're drawn to telling?
Yes, I think from even just a financial perspective, I think being able to incorporate socially conscious messages into a space that's a bit more cerebral and elevated is always going to be a crowd pleaser. And I feel it's important to be able to find new ways of telling stories and to not pigeonhole yourself, especially underrepresented voices, to pigeonhole themselves into one certain type of story. And quite often we find that characters that are people of color are usually within environments of hardship, and they're not really kind of given much autonomy and alias. But I personally, my style of filmmaking is forefronting people of color, women, people with disabilities, and just putting them in situations that you normally wouldn't find them, whether that's in a horror film or sci-fi. And I very much want to be focused within a space of having meaningful messages within that as well about our world.
Yeah. Um, do you remember what the very first spark of the idea of this film was? Was it like a moment, or
I
can you
mean,
tell me about
I've been writing this film. I don't even know when I started. Like it's had that many drafts. Like I don't know when the exact moment was for this. Um, it wasn't actually set in a bar, funnily enough. At the first draft of this wasn't set in the bar, it was actually set in a nightclub, and it was a similar kind of bravado. So just for anybody who doesn't know, the film is about a man and a woman who meet at a bar, and they have a very strong chemistry between them. And as the night kind of continues, the woman, she ends up being intoxicated, and she ends up being taken advantage of by the man that she meets. But what he doesn't really know is that she's not as innocent and vulnerable as she seemed during the night. So originally the story wasn't set in a bar and it didn't have the kind of subversive angle that and reveal that it kind of has at the end now. And it came from a personal experience that I had when I was 19 years old, of feeling as if I wasn't able to say no to a situation in which I was in. And that feeling of helplessness very much developed into also a feeling of rage. Because when you are kind of put into helpless situations, one of the things that kind of comes out of it is this feeling of like, why didn't I say something? Why didn't I do something different? And that's a very much a natural feeling to have. And I think rage in general is a very strong emotion, and I think it carries a lot of weight to it, the way in which we react to things with rage. But it's also something that women aren't naturally encouraged to do, especially within cinema. So I knew that when writing this, I kind of wanted to focus on that, an emotion that is very much dissuaded from the female psyche in media and in television and in film, and harnessing that and giving that to a woman and giving her power back essentially was really important. And I remember also with the first draft, Harry, our protagonist, wasn't doing a lot of the work when it
Mhm.
comes to interacting with Robert, the man that she meets, who was called Daniel at the time, actually. And so I wanted in this newer version to kind of give her a bit more to do and to kind of drive the narrative and also pull back as well and reject and to have that choice and that feeling as if she's the one within and has the power throughout. And she does, even though she loses it for a moment, she is the one who's having the power throughout. And then, funnily enough, also the new iteration of the draft actually was really inspired by an actor, and I had built this story around this actor, Joseph Quinn, who was in A Quiet Place and Fantastic Four and Stranger Things. And there was something just about his performance in A Quiet Place where I was like, damn, I'd really love to work with this actor and imagine if they were in this film. And I kind of just wrote it around how I kind of would perceive they would play this character, and it all just yeah, it all just kind of came out really. And then it's the draft since then, which I probably wrote in summer of last year, hasn't changed much since then. So yeah, I do like to look to talent as well as a way of inspiring the things that I want to write.
A really cool
Yeah.
tidbit. And yeah, so I'm gonna move on to like representation, diversity
Yeah.
questions. So what would you having a woman of color in the lead role, how does that impact the story that you're telling?
It impacts it because it's a display of vulnerability, and I don't think that women of color get the opportunity to display vulnerability in a way that feels cathartic, in a way that feels cathartic and also has nothing to do with their race. Find quite often in cinema when you see portrayals of women of color, especially black women, like it's either to do with racism or that they're in like a poor relationship. Um, and if something bad does happen to them, it is because of that. And they don't actually get much autonomy afterwards either. It is just kind of just like rather bleak hardship throughout without much reclamation afterwards. So I found it very important for Harry to be very vulnerable and in a vulnerable position so that we aren't seen, black women aren't kind of seen as the aggressors as they normally are in cinema. And I think putting her in an environment that doesn't necessarily feel at the beginning unsafe is also important because it shows that like these things can happen to anyone at any point in these spaces and they do happen. So setting the audience up in a space of realism and making sure that that feels really apparent is very important. And then we kind of bring into a bit more of like a cerebral space towards the end, which is like I suppose the more entertaining factor of it is that kind of like switch. But authenticity within women displaying vulnerability, women of color displaying vulnerability is always important to me.
Yeah. So would you say that there's like a stigma or misconception that this film challenges directly in the way that you've made it?
Totally. And I think that the biggest one being is how also sexual assault is portrayed. There's been many films that I've seen directed by men where it becomes a spectacle. And I remember a film that I watched 2 years ago for the first time called Once Upon a Time in America. And it's directed by an Italian director called Sergio Leone. And that film has two portrayals of sexual assault in it, and both of them are really harrowing, and overtly so, to a point where it does feel unnecessary. And I do remember having a conversation with a friend who kind of wanted to work against my opinion of feeling that it was too over explicit, as they kind of felt like, this is real life, this is how it happens. And it's just like, if we're kind of seeing that constant state of explicit violence, then we're becoming very desensitized. First of all, becoming very desensitized to violence in general. And second of all, we kind of aren't coming to an understanding of experiences that don't happen that way. And, because in those situations as well, like not everybody is going to fight. And that's just like science of you having that fight or flight response as well. Those situations are different for everybody, and we should be able, we should have a varied view of that. But I think what's important to note is that you won't actually see the performer's body in the moment when they are taken advantage of, because that's not important to the story. It's more the impact of that experience rather than how they look. Because women's bodies are always fragmented on screen, so I want to avoid that with this.
Um, yeah, so speaking of the horror space, how do you see horror as a tool for social commentary or awareness building? Like why did you specifically choose this genre of film to tell this story?
I think again, from like a marketing and also like a metaphorical perspective, from a metaphorical perspective, the horror of people is I find quite interesting. Not even in the landscape of like, criminals or like serial killers or whatnot, but just like those kind of smaller psychological processes that we go through every day that we may not necessarily like, express openly, but we do have them within us. Everybody kind of has rage, everybody possesses darkness. And so to bring it to the forefront and to not act as if everybody's perfect all the time is something that I want to do. I think Hollywood is a place of glamorization, and the more that we kind of break that down, the more that we're able to have a better human experience. And I think horror really does that. It really kind of taps into fear and the human psyche and kind of what it also means to be human. And sometimes what it means to be human is to have your life threatened as well. And horror films do that, they showcase that quite well. So, and then just from like a marketing perspective, it's like, everybody has an opinion on horror. They either love it or they hate it. And especially when in the independent market as well, they are usually the biggest crowd pleasers too. Like, the Blair Witch Project or even like Longlegs that came out a few years ago, made on a very shoestring budget, but still managed to have an incredible impact. And for any independent filmmaker, I think getting a horror film off the ground is usually the easiest because of that.
So, as far as women goes in horror movies, they're kind of usually either in a category of like victim or final girl.
Mm.
Where would you say the protagonist like falls in that, and how did you do your own take on it?
What is a final girl?
A final
That's the
girl is
term,
when
yeah.
there's a group of people who are like being attacked, and it's like the last girl who makes it, she's the hero, she makes it through it all.
Yeah. I
Like the
guess,
final one that survives,
yeah.
basically.
I guess it wavers. I think that there are moments where she is the victim, but they do feel rather fleeting in comparison to how she kind of regains her control and her autonomy. So I would say it's definitely like a blend of both, and like that to me is a bit more natural. No one's ever just a victim, no one's ever just a persecutor. So I find it important that even in the short space of 20 minutes that you get the best of both worlds, even like with Robert as well. Like I'm not even saying that you should feel sorry for him per se, but obviously that there's a psychological process going underneath him as well that renders him to feel like a victim as well. And I feel like there are many men who also feel like that too in some way. And it's important to be aware of that and acknowledge that too, to create more three-dimensional characters on screen.
Yeah. What would you say that you were most intentional with about in this story? Was it like casting, visuals, the tone of it? Like, was there anything that really, like, I guess, what were you most intentional about?
I think visuals always for me. Film is a visual medium through and through, even with great music, even with great cast. Having that very clear, color palette and the camera angles and lighting, like all of those things, I find incredibly like juicy when making a film. And those are things that I think about to a T. And I think that short film making obviously has a lot of limitations, but if you kind of think outside the box, you can make things look really elevated on like a tight budget. So for me, it's really important to get this landscape that feels really discomforting. We're in a London bar at the end of the week, and those spaces, they feel very social, but sometimes they can also feel incredibly grotesque. So being able to bring that out to an audience is really important with the use of space as well, like wide camera angles going into smaller ones. Things just feeling distorted and uncomfortable towards the audience is important, and that will come through in the visual language as much as anything else.
Was there a first shot that you envisioned when this first came to mind?
Oh my God, that's so interesting because it kind of feels like everything came after one another. It's like three images came and then it was like, six and then nine. That's kind of how it felt. But maybe I would say. Probably wasn't an image. I think it was more the dialogue, I would say. Just like the two people kind of speaking together, and then I kind of built an image of probably like what Harry would look like. That was very solid in my mind, and that actually hasn't really changed since. Like I know exactly how I want her to look. So I just think, yeah, Harry's image, and the way that she speaks and carries herself was like the first image.
Awesome. As far as the organizations go that you're partnering for this project, can you tell us more about them and what their that partnership?
Yes, so we are partnering with three, Right to Be, Voices Beyond a Soul, and Survivors.org, which was formerly known as PAVE, all of which are based in the US. And basically, they provide support and resources to sexual assault survivors. I know that Voices Beyond a Soul and Survivors.org in particular like to use community projects and artistic mediums for trauma recovery. And Voices Beyond Assault is founded by an amazing woman called Brianna, who is a survivor herself, and she leads events in LA for survivors and to also fundraise for her organization. I think it was initially not something that I thought of for doing this film because obviously the film is talking about a very heavy theme, and I didn't really put the two and two together that this could actually have a real social impact with the partnership of organizations. And I'm glad that we've been able to find people who are very interested in the material and interested in having discussions about sexual assault can be portrayed and experienced and overcome in different ways. So it's yeah, it's very important that like within the essay community that we're talking about it through different lenses and not just through the same narrow one that cinema has kind of been portraying for so long.
So there is, from what I remember, three events happening in November in
Yeah.
LA. Do you know enough about that that you can like tell me about what those events are and what's that going to look like?
Yes, so actually, I was also might as well speak about the Voices Beyond Assault event that is happening in Los Angeles on October 2nd. And that is an in-person event at a hotel, and there'll be more information on our social media pages about that if you would like to attend. It's more like a gala type dinner as well at this hotel, so it's a chance to just meet other people and just find out more about the organization. And profits go towards them. And then in Los Angeles in November, we do have three separate events for fundraising, and they will be one of which is a screening of my previous short film, Roach, which hasn't been released online yet, is still going through its festival run, and the trailer is up on YouTube as well, so there will be a screening of that. And then we are planning on having just like a meet and greet, a very casual, informal bar event as well, which will kind of precede the screening just on a different day. And that's another opportunity to network and meet other people and for us to fundraise for the short film. And then the last event I have actually forgotten about, but that's completely fine. I think, yeah, we'll cut over that. But
We'll edit it.
all the events will be on our social media
Cool.
pages.
Great. Can you describe the film in three words?
Mm, never before seen. Yeah, yeah, never before seen. I'll say that.
Love that.
Yeah.
Um, just my last few questions here. What do you think is one thing that people should know about the heart behind this film?
It matters. It matters a lot. It not just to me, and even there's like a wave of egotism when I kind of say that, but like I'm doing this because I think it's necessary, and I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think it was necessary. Because you make one film and you put your energy into one thing, and that gets seen by so many other women who may not necessarily feel seen or feel like they have the money, the time, the energy to be able to make their own films, but are like dying to. That's like the reason why I kind of want to do this and to continue this journey. And I will continue it so, just so that these women are able to know that they are able to go out there and make the films that they want to see on screen.
Great. Okay, that's all the written down questions I have. Is there anything that you think I didn't get or anything you want to add?
Or I just will say that our campaign is launching on Wednesday, October 1st, and it will be running through October through to the end of November. Any pledge you make, it could be $1, it could be $2, is going to go towards a very meaningful and impactful short film. And quite frankly, it isn't the money that matters, it's kind of the backer and to have that support. And knowing that we have, 500 people backing this project, like it means the world. So any amount goes towards this project, no matter how small.